Fibonacci type series. Now, if you notice in this series, it's 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. Alright, if you add 0 and 1, you get 1. If you add 1 and 1, you get 2. If you add 1 and 2, you get 3, so forth and so on. And that's how Fibonacci type series are produced. This isn't the only one, but this is probably the most famous one. Now, a Fibonacci series is a simple set of numbers, yet it appears everywhere in nature. Because it is so pervasive, and because there are several different Fibonacci type series that also appear in nature, there is something far greater to note here, and that is the construction of the series itself and how it's formed. There are 3 reasons why these 2 mathematical constructions appear in nature. 1, because it is most pleasing to the ear. 2, because it's most pleasing to the eye. Now, earlier, when I said that the earth, because of extremely low frequency, I can't remember, because of something called LFRAD. Anyway, this is a worldwide collection system of data that records vibrations and tones and sound. They found that a mysterious tone is emitted from the earth and is 0.618 hertz. Or 0.618 hertz, okay? 1.618 hertz.
It's a sound that's emitted from the earth.
A mysterious tone that they discovered worldwide is emitted from the earth. Because they have different measurement centers all over the world. It's emitted from the earth. Now, what's so important about that, and why I said that earlier, is because that happens to be the mathematical resultant of the Fibonacci series. The numbers tend to go towards this number, actually 0.618. This is what I'm saying, it's pervasive in nature. Because this is the frequency of the earth, okay? Essentially. So, because it is most pleasing to the ear. So everything in biology then, if it is in harmony with the earth, should follow the same. It should be created and constructed in harmony with the tone of the earth. Alright? If it's all connected on sound. I'm not saying it is or isn't, but I'm just saying it could be. Okay? Now, the second reason why these appear in nature is because it is most pleasing to the eye. And I'm going to show you a number of examples here of this. Number 3 reason you see, because the construction yields optimal packing of all characters in space. So when you see the growth patterns, I can use the Lindenmayer system to show you those plants. When you see a growth pattern, what you see on a plant is that all the leaves will come out and stems will come out so that the leaves form an optimal packing system. If you were to look down, it would appear to be like this, and down the top. And the reason it appears to be that way, and also goes up that way, the reason it's that way is so that all the leaves will receive the optimal amount of sunlight. So they're constructed according to that pattern to receive an optimal amount of energy from the sun for photosynthetic purposes. And it's all based on this series. Now, yields optimal packing of all characters in space. Remember what type of construction yields the most meaning and information systems. The highest amount of information and the least amount of symbols yields the greatest amount of information, or greatest amount of meaning. Now, these are the examples. There's a dolphin right there. Moths and butterflies. Shells. Fish. Penguins. Ants. Now this is actually the ruler of the Fibonacci. You see 2, 3. 2 plus 3 equals 5. 5 plus 3 equals 8. 1 plus 2, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You go on down through there. And that's your finger, the digit finger. Your arm. Your facial construction. Male, female. The body construction. The length, the width, the height. The musical scales. 13 notes separate each octave. 8 notes in the scale, of which the 5th and the 3rd notes, 5 plus 3 equals 8, 8 plus 5 equals 13. The 5th and the 3rd notes create the basic foundation of all chords, all major chords, and are based on whole tone, which is 2 steps from the root tone, that is the first note of every scale. So the most musical scales are based on this Fibonacci series. So this goes back to biology being related to the musical scales based in mathematics. 5 musical instruments. The Earth's orbit, the whole solar system, infinity, the series infinity. It goes to prime harmonics. You start with one, you always get divisions of that harmonic. All right, now what is the direct consequence of the construction of this series in nature? Absolutely no transitional species. If you go back to this shows you mathematically why no transitional species can ever exist. It always has to be whole, distinct tones. All right. Absolutely no transitional species can exist, or ever could have existed at any time in history. If it did, it would have broke the system down. Now, because of these principles, there is no process of evolution, and why the fossil record, this explains why the fossil record is void of the millions of transitional fossils that we should have observed by now 149 years since Darwin's hypothesis appeared. The fossil record is proof of creation, not evolution. Why are there no fossils that prove Darwin's hypothesis? Because as we've shown here, it is functionally and mathematically impossible for such a thing to exist. Unifying equation of. Now, this is the equation. This can go to infinity. I could write this equation to infinity and it would describe everything in the universe. And the reason why is because of cursive. It's the exact same thing here below. What this means is that every wave in the universe is composed of smaller fragments of waves. Now I'll get to that in just a second. But that's what it means. And I'll show you why it's the unifying equation. Now, Fourier analysis. All pulsed waves are characterized by their duty cycle, time on and time off. All periodic waves are recursive. Recursive means that it reproduces itself automatically until it gets to a stop point, just like we talked about in all these systems. All periodic waves are recursive, repeat over and over indefinitely. Only discrete whole number ratios allow for periodic waves. So, if everything was gradual transformation, there would be no distinct whole number ratios in reality, or on the earth. If we're talking about biology. There would be no discrete whole number ratios. There would only be fractions of everything. And only whole number ratios allow for periodic waves. So if you go back to Lindenmayer systems, what this means is that only these whole number ratios that we've been describing can reproduce themselves indefinitely. Otherwise, you're going to end up with nothing but noise. Now, every piece of evidence that we have, from Mendel's peas to Darwin's pigeons and finches, to Dobzhansky's fruit flies, to bacteria and yeast, to the fossil record, there is no evolution because nothing has been shown to cross the boundary of these discrete whole number ratio relationships. If the universe was created by the spoken word, this is exactly what you would predict would happen. Every bit of observational experimental data we have amassed over the past 200 years is proof of creation by the spoken word. 3. This is according to Fourier analysis. This is what this equation is. It's Fourier analysis. 3. Any wave that is random is nothing but noise. Any set of waves belonging to the harmonic series will combine to a more complex waveform whose recursive frequency is the largest common multiple of the fundamental frequency. This goes back to what we were talking about whole tones, prime harmonics, and everything else. It is all nothing but small portions of one single long wave that God spoke in the beginning. Universe, one word, is where universe came from. He spoke one word in the beginning. He said, "Let there be light." And everything in the universe is composed, all matter is composed of that light. That is the one single wave that was spoken. Everything else is exactly what it's saying right here. Any set of waves belonging to a harmonic series, everything in this creation, based on that one spoken word, is a piece of that harmonic series. All of those pieces will combine to a more complex waveform whose recursive frequency is the largest common multiple of the fundamental frequency. Now, this is what I'm telling you here about the mathematical proof God created the heavens and the earth. If you take you are composed of, Mr. Sullivan, you are composed of light, as I said before, energy. That energy becomes fundamental particles, photons, protons, electrons. Each of those will have their own type of frequency based on the fundamental energy that is you. Then those will combine to form DNA, eventually molecules, and then DNA. Okay, molecules just like dirt. You're created from the earth, all right, as you just said. Dirt, the same thing that sand is, all these kind of things that we see on earth, that's dirt. What am I trying to say? The periodic table of elements. Okay, so all these fundamental particles come together to form periodic table of elements. Each of these elements of the periodic table, which we have described in chemistry, all have their own frequency. They emit what's called a spectrum. This is measurable, and we've seen them all. We know all the spectrum of the elements. Now, from those coming together, you form proteins and DNA. The DNA coming together has its own frequency. It is a common multiple of the fundamental frequency that is Mr. Sullivan. Then you put that together, and you come up with a cell. It is a fundamental frequency. It is a common multiple of all those combined together that is based on the fundamental frequency of Mr. Sullivan. Then you go up to cell, you go up to tissue. From tissue, you go to organ. From organ, you go to system. From many systems, you go to a population. From a population, you go to a whole ecosystem that is Mr. Sullivan with dark hair, dark eyes, and mustache, long hands, and big feet, whatever he's got. All right, so that is what makes him. But it's all based on, every part of that system is small pieces of waves coming together to form a common multiple of the fundamental frequency that is Mr. Sullivan.